Hey everybody, my name is Emily. Welcome back to my homestead and week 2 of the Every Bit Counts challenge. Challenge where I try to preserve something every day in the month of August. I'm starting out this week processing some zucchini and summer squash that I've collected over a few days. These 8-ball zucchini, I'm actually saving a couple on the side to make dinner with the next evening. We ended up having some stuffed squash and it was pretty good. But the rest of these, I'm going to go ahead and cut off both ends, the blossom end and the stem end, get them chopped up into chunks that will fit in my food processor, and then we will get these shredded. This has been a fantastic year this year for summer squash, and I couldn't be happier with it. In the past, I have struggled a lot, especially with true zucchinis, to get anything to grow. I've done well with the patty pan varieties and some yellow squashes, but this year everything seems to be doing pretty well. I'm getting enough to actually preserve, which is something new for me. I've even been able to give some away to friends, and the funny thing is, after I shredded all this, the next day I went out and harvested almost as much as I had put in the freezer this night. So if you struggle with growing summer squash, don't give up. Eventually, you'll have a good year, just like me, and you'll feel way better about it. I ended up with 6 bags, 5 of which had about 2 cups of shredded zucchini, and one had about 1 3/4 cups. We'll use these for zucchini bread or a quiche or something like that throughout the winter. And it'll be nice to have this as an addition to our food storage for this winter. The next day, I am trying my hand at a different way to preserve green beans. As you can see, these are not snapped. That is because I'm going to try dilly beans. I start out with measuring 1 bean and cutting it to length. And then I go ahead and use that as a measuring tool to cut the rest of the beans. We had gathered quite a few more beans than this, but we kept the ones that were straight and saved those for the dilly beans, and the rest got snapped for just traditional canned green beans later. I'm also saving these ends that I'm cutting off that will go in with the traditional canned green beans. Dilly beans are a pickled green bean, and so I'm making my brine solution that I'm going to get on the stove and get to boiling, so it'll be hot to go in the jars when I'm ready. Then I start crushing up some homegrown garlic that will go in the bottoms of the jars. There has been a recent change in some recipes. If your recipe says to add a clove of garlic, you need to make sure that it is either crushed or finely sliced for it to be a safe canning recipe now. Then into my hot jar, I add the garlic, some dill seed, crushed red pepper, and a bay leaf, hopefully to keep the green beans a little more crisp in the end, because bay leaves have some tannins in them. And then I fill the jars. First with the green beans and then with the brine. I had a little bit of trouble with the beans floating once I put the brine in, and that messing with the headspace. So I did end up figuring out a trick that once I got the beans in the jar and added the brine, I could add a few more beans to the jar to keep them more tightly packed, and then I was able to push them back down to the proper headspace and then put them in the canner for processing. And don't forget to wipe the rim of your jar before putting it on the lid to ensure a good seal. And I ended up with 8 pints of the dilly beans. We still don't know if we're going to like them or not, because you are supposed to wait about 8 weeks for pickled products for them to just sit in that brine, and I think the vinegar mellows out over time, and for you to really just know how the pickle is going to taste and turn out. So it is a waiting game to find out how these are going to taste. and if we're going to do more of these next year or not. The next day is a much smaller but just as important preservation task, and that is dicing up green peppers to put in the freezer. And that is kind of what this challenge is all about. Just because it's not a big canning day doesn't mean it's not a worthy task to go ahead and preserve something from the garden or from the store even, if that's what you have access to. But today I'm just cutting off the tops and the bottoms, taking the seeds out, and then dicing everything up. In retrospect, I should have kept some in slices, but I didn't have the forethought for that. I was almost completely out of sliced peppers in the freezer, but I did still have some diced ones in there. And so that is why I thought I probably should have saved some of these for slices. But that's okay. They'll eat just the same. And when I did end up wanting some sliced peppers later this week, I just went out and grabbed another pepper off the plants because they're doing really well this year. These aren't the largest peppers, and there weren't a lot of them, but I just wanted to take some of the larger ones off the plants to hopefully encourage them to keep growing and keep producing through the season. And another day, and we were back to canning green beans again. This is the biggest batch that I have done, but not all from one picking. This was actually from multiple pickings, and I ended up with 14 quarts and 2 pints this day. Our next preservation project is more green beans, but I decided to try my hand at dehydrating them. Now, I looked up several recipes for this and decided to do it 3 ways. Got them all snapped and washed and got them draining on this towel, and then I will mix them up into 3 separate batches. The first batch was actually just plain. So I spread out about 1/3 of the green beans onto a dehydrating tray and just added them to my dehydrator plain with no seasonings. For the next third, I did a combination of coconut oil, salt, garlic powder, and onion powder. Got that all mixed up and then spread out on dehydrator trays. The coconut oil helps to get everything to stick, all the seasonings, and I believe that's just the purpose of it being there. The third recipe is an Asian style. I did salt, pepper, coconut oil, and coconut aminos. It called for soy sauce in the recipe I found, but since I can't have gluten, I substituted this coconut aminos that I found at the store, and I've heard people talk about how they use that instead of soy sauce for various things, so I thought I would give that a try. Skipping ahead a day, and we are taking everything out of the dehydrator. These took a very long time to dehydrate, over 24 hours, and then we just took them out and taste tested them all. We were not impressed. The ones with spices on them tasted awful. The plain ones were just so-so, and the texture was terrible. So that's something we're definitely not going to be doing again. Back to the beginning of this day, and we are canning more green beans as well as making some dill relish. Now, I want to make sweet relish as well, but I didn't have quite enough pickles to do a whole batch. And I only wanted to do a half batch of dill relish because my husband is the only one who likes the dill relish. I buy it at the store specially for him, and he's the only one that uses it. So I'm only going to make a half batch of this, and it's kind of fitting because this day was actually his birthday. So he was pleased when he got home from work that evening to find out that I had made some dill relish for him. And I start by slicing off the ends of all the cucumbers, cutting them into about 1-inch pieces, and then chopping them up into the food processor. I ended up being a little short on the amount of cucumbers that I had washed and ready to go, so I had to get out a few more to make the correct amount of cups that I needed for this recipe. Then I moved on to red pepper. I also needed about a cup of red pepper for this recipe, I believe, and I got that chopped up as well and added to my bowl of ingredients. Sort of Christmassy to me. And then I got started on my brine. I started out with mincing enough garlic for an entire recipe, which thankfully I realized before I added it to my pot for the brine that I had done twice as much as I needed, so I just saved half of that in a container to use for dinner later in the week, and it was all good. So I got the garlic, cider vinegar, dill, and turmeric into the pot, and it was dill seed, not dill weed. I'm not sure why this recipe didn't have me putting it in a bag to remove later, so I don't know how the texture is going to turn out. I'll just have to let my husband tell me if he liked it or not, and he's one that he'll just eat it anyway, so if he doesn't prefer the texture, I will make it differently next time. But all that got put in the pot with the cucumbers and peppers, brought to a boil for a certain amount of time, and then we were ready to start filling up the jars. I did these in half pints because my husband is the only one who uses them, and he doesn't go through it very quickly. So I usually end up buying small jars at the store anyway, so I figured I would can them in small jars. I ran out of half pints while doing this and ended up putting the last of it into a pint jar. Despite only making a half recipe, this ended up with a lot more than the recipe indicated it would, even for half of it. So that is why I was not expecting to need to use a pint jar. I've run into this before with canning recipe estimates, and it's not the first time that I've had more or less than the estimate. I ended up with 8 half pints and 1 pint of the dill relish, along with 5 quarts and 1 pint of green beans this day. I did not do anything for preservation on day 14, which was the last day of this week. I just needed to take a break this day because I've been doing canning every other day pretty much. So I took that day off so I could be refreshed and ready to go for week 3. And thank you so much for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Bye.